Mizzurna Falls is a 1998 open-world horror mystery thriller developed by Human Entertainment. The plot is incredibly ambitious, especially for the time that the game was made in. It's a game that I think that you should definitely play, but I understand if you haven't. It's a PS1 game, and it's an open-world PS1 game. It's pretty good, but it's incredibly obtuse. It doesn't control very nicely, and it has some extremely harsh time limits on everything. The game consists of 7 days, and you need to be doing specific things during those 7 days at specific hours, or else you'll just trigger the bad ending. So it's not a great player experience, and I get that. But I think it's a story that everyone needs to know about, because this game deals with some stuff that you don't see other games deal with, even today. So this is a video for all of you that will never play it, because this is Mizzurna Falls Explained.
"6:13 a.m. on the 25th of December. A small town in Colorado, at the foot of the Rocky Mountains called Mizzurna Falls. A girl was found in woods on the outskirts of the town, fallen and smeared with blood. The girl, named Cassie Flannery, had scars by an animal's claws all over her body. It seems she was attacked by a bear. Thereafter 7 a.m. on the same day, another girl, Emma Lowland, Cassie's high school classmate, is missing, and her mother has asked police to search her. The state police started their investigation on relevance between the two incidents. At the time of Christmas, it is nothing else than a tragedy that struck a peaceful town of a population of 2,000.
Mizzurna Falls opens up as the titular sleepy town wakes up to the news of 2 local girls having gone missing. Our protagonist Matthew is awoken by a phone call from his friend Winona, who informs him that one of the girls missing is their friend Emma. Matthew gets up and leaves his bedroom, which is a shed behind a store that his uncle Nos owns. And his timing couldn't be any better, as Nos enters the courtyard connected in the store on the shed and tells Matthew to come inside. The sheriff is here to see him. Morgan is out searching for Emma, and he asks Matthew to join him. Kathy, the other girl that disappears, was found this morning, and Morgan is heading up to the hospital to talk to her and try and figure out what happened. Matthew tags along, but as they're about to enter Kathy's hospital room, Morgan realizes that he's about to let a high schooler into a room with a girl that's been through God knows what, and he comes to his senses and tells Matthew to wait outside. Kathy's father, Father Burton, shows up along with one of the other doctors, and they head into her room. The walls are thin, and Matthew can hear everything, including when Kathy wakes up and starts screaming, "Don't!" The doctors try and sedate her, but she dies, seemingly from fear. Having just mentally scarred a child by letting the child overhear one of his classmates die in horrible agony, Morgan just walks out of Kathy's room and tells Matthew that she's dead, and for what I assume is shock reasons, forget that he's Matthew's ride, and also that he just mentally scarred him, and he abandons him in the hall outside Kathy's room. Matthew starts making his way downstairs to leave and figure out how to get home, but he's stopped by one of the doctors that was just in the room with Kathy, and the doctor asks Matthew if he believes in the supernatural, and if Matthew thinks that Kathy could have seen something. either out there or in her room, something that wasn't quite there in our world. They exchange a few words and then the doctor is called into another examination room and tells Matthew that he'll be at the bar later if he wants to talk. Again, like Morgan, forgetting that Matthew is a child. Outside the hospital, Matthew doesn't have to spend a lot of time figuring out how to get back home, as his friend Winona is here and she's brought Matthew's car with her. She tells Matthew that Emma's disappearance is now an official missing persons case, and Matthew decides to go to the sheriff's station and help Morgan piece together a timeline leading up to Emma's disappearance. At the station, he tells Morgan that he last saw Emma at 7 p.m. and then Hudson Lang, the sheriff's deputy, walks in and says that he has a witness that saw Emma at 10 p.m. The witness is Mel, a local delinquent, and he has been brought in for questioning. Morgan and Hudson go to talk to him about what he saw, and Matthew heads to the forest to talk to Cohen, the ranger that found Kathy this morning. Morgan initially objects to Matthew assisting, but he does acknowledge that he is short-handed and that Matthew is gonna investigate the case anyways, regardless of if he forbids it or not, so he tells him to call him if he finds out anything. At Cohen's cabin, Cohen tells Matthew about last night. He says that the forest felt eerily silent and that he knew something was wrong before he found the, at the time, still alive girl. He also thinks that she wasn't there alone, as there was a fire nearby and signs of multiple people. With the Kathy trail dead for now, Matthew figures he should retrace Emma's steps, and so he goes to her parents' house in the hope that he can find some clues in her bedroom. But her mother freaks out at the thought of someone disturbing her room, so Emma's father Steve asks Matthew to come back later and take a look. When things calm down a bit, Matthew asks Steve about Emma and he says that she came home about 8 p.m. yesterday and that she seemed tired and went to bed early. So either Mel is lying about 10 p.m. or Emma snuck out after saying goodnight to her father. Winona is also at the house and she asks Matthew if he can give her a ride home, as her dad doesn't want her out walking alone given what has just happened. During the drive to her house, she mentions that Emma was reading this strange book about philosophy. Matthew figures that that's probably the best lead they have so far, and he goes to check out the book at the library to get some insight into what Emma was going through. At the library, Matthew runs into Emma's favorite teacher, and she mentions that Emma did seem a little distraught as of late, and that she's afraid that she might have run away. Matthew has a hard time reconciling what the teacher Liz is saying with how he knows Emma, as he only knows her as a very happy and ordinary girl. But when he goes to check out the book she was reading, a note falls out and it reads, "Nothing exists, and if it did, no one can be aware of it. And if anyone was aware of it, they could not communicate it to others." If this is Emma's writing, then maybe Liz was right. Maybe she was going through something. Emma's father has called a town meeting at the church, and Matthew heads up there and chats to Dr. Samuels, who was one of Kathy's doctors. He mentions to Matthew that it looked like Kathy had been attacked by an animal. And when Matthew asks how she died, Samuel says that the attack she suffered earlier put her in a fugue state, and when she woke up, something must have triggered a flashback that put her into shock and killed her. Matthew concludes that something in the room, or someone, must have caused the flashback, which means that either Samuels, James Loloma, Father Burton, or Morgan had something to do with Kathy's attack. And well, Morgan isn't exactly making himself look very innocent. He dismisses Matthew's theory and Cohen's feeling that there was something wrong in the air that night, and thinks that Kathy and Emma went into the forest to have some young people fun and lit a fire, and that's why there are several tracks, and that's how a bear was attracted and attacked Kathy and did God knows what to Emma. And then he kicks Matthew out of the meeting, as it's an adults-only town meeting. On his way out, Matthew asks Cohen if it could have been a bear attack. And while Cohen says that it's not impossible, he does say that it's improbable. Bears usually hibernate around this time, and even if they didn't, they don't really see humans as a food source. and whoever attacked Kathy didn't try and eat her or leave behind signs of mauling. Matthew pretends to leave the town hall meeting, but Matthew, being Matthew, of course listens in through the door, and he learns that Kathy had choke marks on her neck, but Morgan and Samuels both insist that this is an animal attack, although Morgan does concede that the whole thing is a little suspicious. The search for Emma in the forest is starting a little later, so Matthew stops by the local diner to get a bite to eat. The girl working there today is Lorraine, and she asks Matthew if he knew Kathy and Emma were friends, and he replies that he didn't think they were. Lorraine says that she thought as much, but that she can understand if they were, as they both seemed similar in a way, like you couldn't even ever tell what either of them were thinking. As they are chatting, Mel Aston walks in, Lorraine's on-again, off-again boyfriend, and the guy that Morgan and Hudson were just questioning this morning. Matthew tries to ask him a few questions about the when and where he saw Emma, but Mel gets defensive and won't answer. Lorraine feigns being jealous and demands that he tell them what he knows, and he angrily says that he just walked past her up by Coughlin Peak and that they briefly chatted, and that Emma said that she was heading towards the church. And then Mel, he storms off. According to Lorraine, he's not having an easy time as of late. His father, Dennis Aston, is the owner of Aston Farms, and his men are striking because he won't build them new lodgings. So the business is in shambles, and the townsfolk are giving Mel weird glances. Matthew tries to join the search in the forest, but like with the town hall meeting, Morgan won't allow it. He does, however, let Matthew know that Mel was spotted at the Wolf's Bar after running into Emma, and that he has an alibi for the night. Matthew isn't quite sure why Mel would need an alibi, but Morgan says that the choke marks on Kathy's neck probably wasn't made by an animal, and that they might be looking at a possible murder case now that there is a body. Not knowing what else to do, Matthew goes to Aston Farms to check out what is happening with the protest. And he arrives just as the protesters and Dennis are arguing. Matthew asks if Mel is home, and Dennis says he doesn't know and that his room is off to the side of the building. Matthew enters and no one is there, and then he finds a note, but just as he does, he hears Mel's bike pull up outside and Matthew hides in a closet. Mel enters and the phone rings, and he picks it up. He assures whoever is on the other side that he has taken care of the Emma problem, and that they will meet them on the next day on the 26th. He senses that someone else is here in the room, but just before he can open the closet that Matthew is hiding in, his father can be heard in the distance screaming his name, and his suspicion fades and he goes to see what is up. There are still a couple of hours left before the Wolf's Bar opens, so Matthew swings by to ask Samuels about the choke marks. He informs Matthew that they were sustained within 24 hours of her death, and that he thinks that Kathy was having some fun with the guy in the woods, and that he tried to feel her up, and that she said no, and then he choked her when she denied him, but that she fought him off and ran away, and that's how she ended up getting mauled by a bear. Speaking of middle-aged men who seem to know a little too much about what underage teenage girls are up to, Matthew stops by James Laloma's office and asks him about the philosophy quote that Emma wrote as a note in the book he found at the library. He remarks that it's a fitting quote for Emma, and when Matthew asks how he can know that, James tells him that Emma used to frequent the Wolf's Bar a lot, so much that she was kind of a regular, if it wasn't before. The town's watering hole is certainly a place of interest now. At the bar, Matthew orders a glass of milk and then asks the barman Wolf if he knows Emma. He says that she was a regular and that she turned heads. She had a reputation at the bar for being crazy, because one time a guy got a little too into her and she stabbed him in the thigh with a fork. She apparently always came here alone, except for one time when she brought a girl that by description sounds a lot like Kathy. Mel walks in and Matthew begins asking questions that Mel doesn't like answering. They are interrupted when a biker-looking guy comes in and starts taunting Mel, asking where Emma is. The biker senses that Matthew is confused by their relationship and says that Mel was always trying to get with Emma. Matthew and Mel start arguing and it devolves into a fistfight. Matthew is victorious and Mel runs off. Winona calls and asks Matthew to meet her at the park. Turns out that the girl that Emma brought into the bar that night wasn't Kathy, it was Winona. She was shocked that night, shocked at what her friend was really like, and shocked at the kind of place she liked to frequent. Emma asked her that night if Winona would be sad if she disappeared, even though she told her, of course, she regrets not being able to tell her more, like what she's feeling now. Matthew and Winona hug it out, and they drive back to Winona's. They bid each other goodnight, and Matthew heads back to his shed behind the store to catch some sleep. It's been an eventful day, and I have a feeling that tomorrow will be even more so.